Alrighty then. Good evening, everybody. Wow, that voice, it echoes. That's nice. This is the World Religions class, so that's what we are going to be talking about and studying this quarter. I'm excited for this. Our first lesson we talked on Sunday morning about some things. We won't rehash a lot of that, but what we were talking about is just basically goals for the class, what we wanted to get out of it, make sure that we keep in mind as we go through. And we're going to hit on some of those things, sort of again, some things from a different angle, and talk about some other things tonight. So that is my plan. That sounds pretty convoluted and not very specific. But I have some stuff up here, so hopefully we can do some stuff that makes sense. But before we begin, I've asked Aaron to lead us in a word of prayer. Amen. Appreciate that prayer, Aaron, and there's a lot that you mentioned in there that I think is spot on for what we're doing. We are trying to equip ourselves to reach the people around us. And the people around us might have so many different beliefs. There's all kinds of different viewpoints, and even from a cultural perspective that influences the way people think and believe and all of that. And so there's a lot that we need to be mindful of. Bonus points if you can finish this quote. It doesn't have to be exact, just try to put you all on the spot, see what happens. I have become all things to all men. Ooh. Do we know? I have become all things to all men so that I can what? Well, there it is, so I can win some. That's 1 Corinthians 9:22. Very nice. You get 5 bonus points, Aaron. Good job. That's an interesting thing. And when Paul was saying that, I think that's sort of the essence of what I want this class to be and how we think about this. Because we become all things to all men in order that we can save some, hopefully. And that's our goal. We want to reach out to people. We want to be able to connect with people on a level that we might not have been able to before. And part of that is understanding their worldview, where they're coming from, and some of those things. Now, anytime we say anything like that, we always have to backpedal a little bit and say, but, caution. That doesn't mean that we have this attitude of I need to, I need to worship with them and become like them so I can teach them. Like that's not it either. And there's some parts of this lesson I think help to keep us straight on that. But we do need to understand where people are coming from. Especially with some of these religions that I'm not very familiar with, there's a lot of people who call themselves Christians that I think we can relate to almost immediately because we just go to the Bible and we start reading and we can connect there, and I think that is helpful in a lot of cases. But in a lot of cases, it's not that simple, and there are people with worldviews that are opposed to the Bible, that have their own system of religious writings, or maybe some that have no kind of religious writings. And so we have to figure out how we can approach them without intentionally offending them or whatever, and reaching them with the gospel. That is our goal. So this first lesson here, actually, to be 100% honest with you, I don't like most of what this first lesson is. I agree with everything that's in this lesson, for sure. And understanding the Lord's church, understanding what the Lord expects out of us in worship is so important, and we have to understand that. I just don't think we're going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that specifically. There are some things that will help and that we need to make sure that we have straight, so when we approach other people that'll be helpful. But, again, we're not converting people to a system of worship. We're converting people to the Lord, and so we need to find ways to connect them with the most important thing, Jesus Christ and Him crucified. That is the thing we are trying to look at here. So, with all that in mind, and with tempering our thoughts here, let's jump into a little bit of this. We're actually on like the second page. It's called page 6. But one thing here, the third paragraph, well, I guess you would consider it third, one that begins, one more word of caution before we start the study. Other people love their religion as much as we love ours. This is sort of where we left off on Sunday. Thinking that, I have the truth, and that means everyone else, they're following this false religion. They are serving false gods, and that means that they are against the truth, and they are evil people. That's just not the case. That's their concept of what they follow. They're very sincere. They love what they do, and they love their religion, and they're very proud of their religious heritage. And even if it looks like they don't have very much involvement with it, they're very deeply connected, because that's like one of the basic essence of being human is connecting with a higher power of some sort. And so keep that in mind. If our approach is just to go, spiritual guns blazing and just throwing out all these truth bombs that are like, you're wrong because of this, you're wrong because of this, that's probably not going to be effective in reaching those people. Like, it automatically puts the guards up and closes the mouth. So we need to be careful with that. So, keeping this in mind and tempering this, there are 3 things the guy in the book mentions here. First, means that people, as a rule, are happy to talk about their religion, and that's mostly true. A lot of times, if you ask somebody about what they believe, what they think of it, like, people like talking about themselves, and people like talking about what they like talking about. And if you are coming to them and not in like a let's fight this out type of way, if it's more of like, hey, what do you think about this? They're more likely to talk, and they're probably going to be happy to do that. So remember that as we're approaching people, in general, people do want to talk about that. The rest of it is kind of up to them, but that is something that is really cool. The second part of this is that I like the illustration here. Ask somebody about, you have pictures of your grandkids? Let me see them. And they show you the picture, and you're like, they're ugly. Like, don't do that. I mean, the same thing about like other people's religious beliefs. It's like, you believe that? Really? Like, how dumb can you be? Like, come on now. That's probably not a good approach to that. And the third thing, don't expect people to be an expert on their religion. Sometimes people don't believe what they should believe. And just because someone is in a certain branch of religion, and this goes for anybody of any type of religion, they might not know everything that their group or organization stands for. And they might not be on board with some of that. And they might be directly opposed to some of that. I don't remember if I told you guys, I probably told you guys some of this on Sunday, but there's people that Meredith and I were talking to, or specifically her, about this lady was worshiping with a group that she was like, my church, they're having the Lord's Supper on a Friday, and it's like, that's not what the Bible says. But, they're just going along with it. And that sort of thing happens. There was a lady that I was studying with for a while. She is Catholic now, but she was raised Baptist, and there are like some really weird, conflicting things that she believes. But it was just really an interesting study. All that goes to show every person is different, and every person's understanding, every person's just dedication to what they believe and what they agree with and what they don't. I'm just telling you that to say, listen, use your ears, ask questions, let them tell you where they are and what they see things as, and then you can move the conversation from there. I think it's always best to get a good understanding of where people are instead of automatically just throwing out arguments against something that you think that they believe. I think that's called a straw man argument when it's like you're taking the essence of what their religious beliefs are and then trying to break it down. Listen to what they are saying, and that's going to go a lot better, I think. Any thoughts on any of that? Any ideas about what we should think about?
So there's an old story that I have not been able to confirm that it's true. In fact, I've talked to several people who work in banks, and they seem to act like they've never heard this in their life. But this whole story goes that they don't train bank tellers to spot all the counterfeits. They train them to spot the true dollar, $5, $10 bill. If they know what the real currency looks like, then they can just automatically know that, when they touch this, it doesn't have the right weight, doesn't have the right feel, the right smell. There's something off about it. They can know. And I kind of get the feeling from this first lesson, that's the idea, is we're just going to know.
Right.
And that's really good for us. When you go into the world and you go find somebody that's going to spend that $20 bill, and you go, oh, hey, that's not a real $20 bill. They're going to look at you and go, it'll spend all the same. This place over here is going to take it. I can buy my groceries and go on. It's serving the purpose that I want with it. And many people, I think, in the religious world kind of have the same mentality. If we just come to them and, like you said, just I'm going to hammer you with all of the things that are wrong in your religion, this has got me through some dark times. This relationship I have has done this for me, and so it'll spend all the same.
That's a good point. It really is. Yeah.
I think Paul in Athens is a great example of beating somebody down. I think in the King James version, he says, "I'm not perceiving to be religious people." Some people take it as a sarcastic remark. I don't think so. Personally, I think he's saying, you obviously care about being pleasing to your God, so much so that just in case you miss one, you got an idol right here for it.
Right.
So commend them for being religious, and then teaching them the truth.
That is an awesome point there. I mean, sometimes an open door can just be if we notice something in them, and we hey, I noticed you're spiritually minded. Let's talk about something and that's a pretty easy lead in there. And so I think taking Paul's stance on that would be very helpful. And his whole dealings with the Athens were just spot on and amazing. But it is the more that we understand truth and authentic Christianity, what that looks like, what God is looking for, and what we need to be doing, we are better off in understanding what some of these false doctrines are. Because, I mean, it is impossible, I'll say it, it's impossible to be an expert in all of the areas where you could be wrong, scripturally speaking. There is one truth. How many lies? Let's go with lies. If there's one truth, how many lies could there possibly be? Infinite. I mean, yeah. If there's one truth, any deviation from that is wrong. And so what we need to do is train ourselves to see that. And that is the point of this first lesson. And I do appreciate that. And so we need to understand where we are, where we're supposed to be. And so that way we can help lead people to what the truth is. And to be able to identify when there is something that is not the truth. So really, really good stuff. Any other thoughts before we jump into what is religion? Okay, well, how about this? What is religion? This is an interesting question. And anybody want to take a stab? You can read some of that if you want. But what is religion? What does that boil down to?
At its core, religion is adherence to, whether it be a doctrine or a code or a moral value, set of values. It's just adherence to something. I don't think many people look at it like that today. They treat it more as some sort of rigidity that is bound up in people who claim to be spiritual but aren't, as if they don't coexist. But
that's a good point.
Really at its core, it's just adhering to something.
Yeah, and that's it. I think the concept of what religion is. Religion has got a bad name in a lot of places, and nowadays you tell somebody you're religious, it's like, ugh, what? But I've heard people talking about like, I am religious about washing my hands. Just someone who's very dedicated to make sure they wash their hands, and that's something they adhere to that, and they do that a lot. So, and that's interesting because I think sometimes the way that religion in general is treated is not as dedicated. So it's kind of strange how that's their disconnection there. But religion at its core is supposed to be something that we are adhering to something. We are trying to do something and get somewhere. And what joins a lot of religious faiths today is search for answers for certain questions. Like, where did we come from? Why are we here? Is there a purpose for being here? What is man? Is there a higher power? And what does that higher power want, if anything? And so those sorts of things. How should a person of goodwill behave? Like, what should we do? How should we treat other people? What does that look like? What do I get out of life? What's our destiny after this life? All of those things are typically answered in religious beliefs, or at least those are searched for and talked about. And the second paragraph there, religion and culture are typically linked, pretty hardcore. And so, like, a culture can impact a religion, and religion can impact the culture as well. You see the Old Testament Jews, and their culture was their religion. It was all that. Their Independence Day was the Passover, and so, like, what they had was all bound up together. And a lot of times that's what happens now. And so the way that people think about things is influenced by their culture, but also by their religious beliefs. And you can get some really strange mixtures there of, I'm from this culture, but I have this religious belief. And you can get some things that are sort of like kind of opposed. But it's really interesting stuff. But really, not all religions are the same. It's a statement here. I think it's like, well, duh. But we do need to hear that. And we need to realize not everybody thinks the same way and is all going to the same point or whatever. We got to remind ourselves, like at the top of page 7, that there is only one God and one Creator. So in all of this, as we're studying these things, one danger that we got to be aware of and got to be sure that we are keeping our eyes open for is that we don't get fooled by the counterfeits. As we're looking into these things, I think there are some really good points about several of these religions. I really do. I think there's some really good lessons that we can learn. And some of the diligence that people who follow some of these faiths is just amazing. And we can learn a lot of lessons from that. But I don't want us to get caught up in the I say modern concept. It's really been around for forever. But this thing that everybody's okay and we can all get along, and we got to watch out for that because when it comes down to it, God is a jealous God, and there is one God, and He does not take kindly to His name being taken in vain. He doesn't like vain worship, any of that. There's a few examples at the top right of page 7. Adam and Eve, Nadab, Abihu, the Sabbath breaker dude, Moses, Achan, Saul, Uzzah, and King Uzziah. All of those, probably familiar with most of those stories and what happened there. Somebody was given a thing that they were supposed to do. That God gave them instruction. These people didn't do it in some way. Either they left something out or they included something that they shouldn't. And because of that, God punished them. Some of these people were struck dead immediately. Some were struck with leprosy. Some were swallowed up in the ground. There were so many things that happened. But that shows us God expects us to figure out what He wants. And the way He does that is He reveals it to us. So that's something to consider. God cares enough about wanting to be worshipped in the right way, but He also cares enough to tell us what He wants too. And so He not only expects that, but He reveals that to us. So that is something to consider as well.
In addition to these on the top of page 7, those that are adding Colossians chapter 2, verse 23, Paul talks about this, saying, "These have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh." There are many people who rightfully so look at self-made religion and say, that's not making you any better. Why should I be a part of that? And so not only knowing the truth and this is what God says, but limiting the truth to this is what God says, not necessarily this is my tradition, my opinion, this is what I really want. No, this is what God wants.
That's a really good point. And we've got to always come back to that. What does God want? And that's something that even when we're talking to people, that needs to be obvious in the way that we approach them. I mean, it's, what I care about is what God wants. And ultimately, I want to please Him. And, that might look different than what you or whoever has been raised to see and believe. But that's something, we got to get to that eventually, sooner rather than later. So, yeah, good stuff. Anything else on any of that? People see hypocrisy in a lot of things. And even if someone is not necessarily what you would consider to be religious, there's a lot of people with a lot of strong opinions about how. I was talking to it. This has been so many years ago. I don't remember, but I was talking to someone and he was not religious at all. But he was like, "Why are there so many churches? Why do we have so many different?" And everybody thinks they're right. And everybody thinks that they're serving God, but they're all doing different stuff. And they all tell you that they've got it together. And so what do we do with that? And I see that now. When I was in high school at the time, and I didn't know what to say. I was like, "Yep, you're right." But when you think about that, how do you respond to that? It's like, there is a lot of man-made religion. There's a lot of people who are wanting to, worship God, but in a sense worship themselves. And it's what I want. And that's something that I think is confusing to the religious world and the non-religious world as well. And something that hopefully we can learn how to be a light in that darkness, that we can help reach out to those. Anyways, here's the point, and here's where I wanted to go. The biggest thing about this lesson that I want us to know, like from tonight, Wednesday evening, here's what I want from us. So this section here where it starts out Christianity, obviously I think that's where we stand. That's where we are. Page 8, Christianity, and there's all kinds of stuff we can think about with this, but you think about where Christianity came from. It was sort of the ultimate goal of where Judaism was leading. And so you have Old Testament that led up to Jesus himself in the New Testament. And so the most important figure ever is Jesus. And so we need to, that's obviously where we are with that. The thing that separates Christianity from all other religions is Jesus. And it's not only just the things that he did, but, almost every single person on planet Earth will tell you Jesus was a real person. There's too much evidence to say he wasn't. So Jesus was a real person. Jesus was a teacher. I think we could establish that as well. He was. Some people might even go as far to say he was a prophet. It just depends on who you talk to. But there's also a lot of evidence to suggest Jesus was killed. He was taken by his own people and killed. He was crucified. I think those are all points that the world can look at and be like, yeah, those are true. The one thing that separates Jesus from anybody else, was the resurrection. And that is the key, I think, where a lot of this stands. If you can establish the historical account of the resurrection, if you can show people that Jesus was really raised from the dead, that can change the conversation a lot. And so this is the thing that like all of the rest of the book, really. If you can have a conversation with someone about the resurrection of Jesus, and if you can establish that and have some good evidence to support that, you're going to go a long way in being able to reach these people. And now, we have to have some clarity of how to do that, and how do we get there, and what do we bring up. But I think we need to understand that for ourselves, actually. So I want to take a few minutes just to think through resurrection of Christ. What are some things about the resurrection? Okay, let me do it this way. What are some of the theories or whatever that try to discredit the account of the resurrection? What do some people say about the resurrection to try to say, no, it wasn't a real thing? Yeah, Jesus' body was stolen. His own disciples just took him away, and that they set it all up themselves. And actually, that's what the account we see in Matthew 28, what the Jews were saying happened. And so it's no surprise that that's still being said. What do we say to that? Why? What sorts of things can we say to someone who says that? Oh, his disciples stole the body and they made it all up. Okay, yeah, there were some prophecies. There were some very specific things that was said beforehand that would lead itself to, it actually happened like he said it would. So that's interesting. What else?
So, very few people will give their lives for a guy who's buried in Peter's backyard.
That's a good point. Of all people who would know whether or not it was true, it would be the apostles, because they are the ones who were following him. And if that was true, that they had stolen the body, they would be the ones who knew that was the truth, and what they were saying was a lie. How many of them died nice, peaceful deaths? What did they suffer because of that lie, if it was a lie? There was such a change, especially, we see that a lot in just the account looking at Peter. And, even apart from the Bible accounts, if you read about some of the historical accounts of how these guys died, it's like, man, they went all out. And they suffered, well, some of them not very long, but long, hard lives of just terrible situations to be killed. Like, is there any kind of lie that you would feel strongly enough about to go to your death for? And to live like that for. Yeah.
We're giving examples from Gamaliel of false teachers who had a following, and then when the heat was on, when they were being persecuted, and quickly died away. And he was using that to say, if it's what's happening with Jesus, if this is true, there's not a point to stop it. And if it's a dream, then it's going to die out.
Yeah. Amen. Exactly. Yeah, that was a really good example of the ones that Gamaliel brought. He brought up a couple of examples of in Acts 5. There you go. Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, no, just the audacity of the Bible to say something like that. Like that's one thing that helps give credibility to the Bible, for sure. All of the things that it's like, could that statement give some people doubt? I'm sure it could. But is the Bible afraid of scrutiny and being under the microscope? Absolutely not. There's a lot of evidence there, and so that was a really good point.
Just to piggyback off that comment, if you're going to steal the body and you're going to make this announcement, you're definitely not going to have these women be the ones that discover it. Their testimony is incredibly unreliable in that day. The testimony of a woman has no weight in the first century. And yet the Bible says that's the people who discover it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, exactly. There's so many things. When you really pick at these arguments, like sometimes if someone comes at you and it's like, here at the moment, it's like, I don't know what to say. But if you really just like think through it and analyze it and be like, okay, if that was true, then what do we say about these people? What do we say about the, how the Roman government would feel about this? What do we say about how the Jews would feel? And because they're the ones who were in charge of getting those soldiers in place to guard the tomb. What do you do with that? So that's are they admitting to being so weak that this group of 12 non-military group of people could come? And I mean, that just doesn't make sense when you really look at it.
That's a really common belief for many who kind of shifted from the disciples or even from the Jews to the Romans. And not necessarily an idea of trying to cover it up, just it was known that a lot of times the Romans didn't bury those that are crucified. They found a place, they left them out there, and dogs and wild animals cleaned up what was left. And so what happened to Jesus' body? A lot of people say that. The Romans did exactly what they do, but Rome does not want this guy to disappear because that's what he's been saying he's going to do. That's what the Jews have said. That's why the Jews are in an uproar. If he does disappear, this is a problem for more than just the Jews. It's a problem for Rome, and Rome really wants peace.
They do, yeah. I mean, they don't want this uprising because how upset would the Jews be if they were just like, yeah, you can go. I mean, yeah, you just get lost. Like, no, they're not going to be happy with that. And so the psychology behind all of that, of just what is really important to them, is very true.
At the end of the day, you can argue with someone and say you live in faith. There's just a beautiful amount of faith that you can have. But that's with any religion as well. I mean,
It is true. It is true. Yeah, and there are some people who you could present like clear evidence right in their face, and it would just do nothing. Same thing happened to people right when Jesus was dying, right after he rose, and after he had appeared to people after. I mean, they were still just completely like, nope, don't want to hear it. And we gotta realize that is true. And if we spend all of our time trying to talk to just one person and just trying to convince them, we're trying to get, here's some more, and here's some more, and here's more. Number one, don't try to beat people. That was a terrible kind of hand gesture to use with that. But there's a time where it's just like, okay, here's the evidence. You do with it what you're going to. I'm going to keep going, and that's really what it comes down to. There are some other things that you could consider with the resurrection. What other things have you heard other than the disciple stole his body? Yeah.
What was with the agnostics that said that Jesus didn't exist physically? That he was a spirit here on earth.
Yeah.
So he never really died because he never existed physically.
Right. Yeah, and that was out there. But that was a thing. And there was this concept that it was just a spiritual thing, and there was no physical body. And to all that, I would say Jews would probably realize that, and it would be something that they wouldn't, they wouldn't have been too scared of, or maybe they would have been even more scared. I don't know. Either way, you look at that. Yeah, and there's some, just textual things about how Jesus was making himself very well known, and about the whole here, feel my side, and even after his resurrection. That was a thing. And to go along with that, Jesus, his resurrection wasn't a physical resurrection. His body was still there. It was just a spiritual resurrection. And if that's the case, one of the biggest, I think, for us, what we need to be solid on is 1 Corinthians 15. I think that chapter is one of just the best, the strongest pieces of evidence for us in a lot of ways. for several reasons. One, I don't want to number them because I'll get lost in the numbers. But in 1 Corinthians 15, there were so many things that are given as evidence of the resurrection, because that's what Paul was dealing with in that. And I don't want to get into a study of 1 Corinthians because, that's who I'm competing with. But I just did tag out, I got the rest of this one, you get. But out of all of the letters that Paul wrote, 1 Corinthians is one of the least contested, meaning that almost everybody agrees. This was Paul, and this was written by Paul in the first century for sure. Like, it is. And there's no doubt that the words that we read in 1 Corinthians 15 are. So, take that, and that's good. But then the things that he brings up, he mentions a lot of stuff. But then in verse 4 through 6, he was buried, raised on the third day according to Scriptures. He appeared to Cephas, then the 12. He appeared to more than 500 brethren at one time, most of whom remain until now, but some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, all the apostles, and then to Paul as well. There's a lot to unpack in that, and there's a lot if you really dive into. But really, if the resurrection was a lie, an easy way to discredit Paul right here on the spot is just, okay, those 500 people, where are they? Let me interview them. Because at this time, he even says, most of whom remain until now. So when Paul was writing this, these people were still alive. If you want to discredit it, go to those eyewitnesses and be like, okay, so where's he at? And see what they say. Because there's a few things like the hallucination. Maybe it was a mass hallucination and just all these people saw him at once. You know how many times that a large group of 500 people have hallucinated the same thing? Never. That's not a thing that's not how hallucinations work. It's like one person, if a whole entire group of people are hallucinating, one person's going to see a robot with rainbows shooting out of his eyes, and another person's going to see a rabbit frolicking through. I don't know. There's just going to be so many things, you're not going to be able to line it up. I think that this is showing a lot that he's willing to go on a limb and say this. Let alone the fact that the Apostle Paul was very well known for his previous life before becoming a Christian. His conversion, I think, shows a lot. If he was willing to say this sort of stuff, given his position, given where he was before, and what he had to lose, and what he gave up, and the things that he suffered and endured, again, going back to what the other apostles did, but Paul, that's one. You might be able to convince me that Peter could have done something like that. He was just really strong follower of Jesus, all that, but Paul, he had nothing to gain and everything to lose if this was a lie. So there's that. There's all kinds of other things in there to unpack too. I'm just trying to really hammer home that we need to be familiar with, comfortable with the resurrection, and how to answer some of these things that people say. I think there is a lot of strong evidence to support it, and we don't need to be ignorant of that. Anything else that anybody wants to say about the resurrection? Any of this?
Just to your point about 1 Corinthians 15, Acts 2 is a sister account to that, in which if ever there was a chance to squash this, Peter said, "This Jesus God has made both Lord and Christ, whom you crucified." They could have easily said, "Here's the body."
Yeah.
If he was there, if there was any doubt whatsoever, they could have squashed it. That would have been the opportunity to completely dismantle this movement. And yet there wasn't. We know there was at least 3,000 people there, likely tens of thousands more, and there wasn't a soul that could say, "Here's my proof that that's not true."
Right. And that's a big deal. You boil it down to that. It's hard to overlook that evidence. And then, what you do, if we can establish that with people, resurrection was a thing, that means that Jesus has enough power somehow to be raised from the dead. Because that's not normal. That's not, think everybody would agree. That's not a thing that happens on the daily. So if we see Jesus as having that power, then that must mean he is powerful enough to be able to preserve the things that he said, and probably worthy to be worshipped as well. And that's the leap of getting from the resurrection to the Scriptures are the Word of God. I think that's a logical flow, logical connection. And you'd be surprised how many, like world religions, I haven't had that conversation with a lot of different faiths. I did get to have that conversation with a couple of Mormons one time, and it was really interesting. It had some really good talks, and I just made some comments about how, it's like, well, the resurrection of Jesus is pretty obvious, and we can establish that. And they're like, what do you mean? And so went over a lot of what we just talked about. And they're like, whoa, this is really cool. That was the last I saw of them. But, it was just, that's an amazing thing to be able to think through that. Now, all of these, the rest of this, what the church is, with the organization of it, we need to know that. We need to be aware of that. And that's something, if you struggle with, if you need more help and guidance on that, we can talk later. You can ask other people too. But it's good to be solid on that. So, like Carl was saying, we know what the real thing is, so we can identify some of the counterfeits. As far as the other stuff, I don't think I want to talk a whole lot about. If there are things that you want to bring up right now, mention real quick, or have questions about, that's fine. This will be the only lesson that we don't really dive into the questions from this section a lot. I do fully anticipate every other lesson we will hit the questions. We're going to spend some time talking about the religion, what it is, what it looks like, what they believe. Going to try to be as fair as possible. Don't want to say things that aren't true about what people believe and their faith. And we also want to talk about some common ground we have and some ways to start up conversations and things to mention as we are talking to them. Now, as you look through this, if there are specific religions that you think that you are more likely to encounter, that you want to make sure that we get to, that we talk about, let me know, because I don't want to shortchange any of these. There are some in my mind that you are more likely to encounter based on just the demographics around here, just based on how many of these worship centers are around. And we'll make sure to hit the highlights and get to those, or if there's anything else. So just let me know on that if there's anything you want to talk about. If not, though, we'll pick up Judaism Sunday morning, Lord willing. Thanks, everybody.